Welcome back to Haunted Horror Stories. In today's episode, I'm sharing 7 deeply disturbing stories from Alaska's polar night, that endless darkness that swallows the far north for months each winter. These are tales of people who faced something ancient and unknowable in that unbroken cold. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Story 1. The research station at Prudhoe Bay had been my home for 3 winters before I stopped trusting the darkness. I worked as a climate data technician, which mostly meant sitting in a prefab building checking sensors and drinking coffee that tasted like motor oil. The pay was incredible, and I liked the isolation. My girlfriend back in Anchorage thought I was crazy, but she didn't understand how peaceful it could be when the world narrowed to just you and your work. November hits different up there. The sun dips below the horizon in mid-November and doesn't come back until late January. 67 days of night. Most people assume it's pitch black the whole time, but that's not quite right. There's twilight for a few hours each day, this deep blue that makes the snow look purple. The rest of the time, if the moon's out and the sky's clear, you can see pretty well. I'd been through it twice already. I thought I knew what to expect. The station housed 6 of us that winter. There was Henrik Sorensen, the lead scientist, a Norwegian guy who'd worked in Svalbard. Tatiana Volkov handled the ice core samples. James Okonkwo ran the meteorological equipment. Brooke Tessier managed our supplies and food. Marcus Ewan maintained the generators and vehicles. And me, Riley Nakamura, making sure the sensors kept talking to the satellites. We had a pretty good routine. Everyone did their work. We rotated cooking duty, and twice a week we'd have movie night in the common room. The nearest town was Deadhorse, about 5 miles east, but we rarely went. Everything we needed came in on the weekly supply truck. It was early December when Marcus noticed the footprints. I remember because I'd just finished inventory on the diesel fuel. We were going through it faster than expected, which annoyed me because I'd have to adjust my logs. Marcus came into the common room looking confused, which was unusual for him. He wasn't the type to get rattled. "There are prints around the shed," he said. "Fresh ones." Henrik glanced up from his laptop. "Probably a fox. They come around sometimes looking for food waste." "These aren't fox prints," Marcus said. "They're barefoot human." That got everyone's attention. The temperature had been hovering around -35 for a week. Nobody goes barefoot in that. You'd lose your toes in minutes. We all went out to look, bundled in our parkas. The prince circled the equipment shed 3 times, then headed north toward the darkness beyond our floodlights. Marcus was right. They were human footprints, clear as anything in the fresh snow, each toe distinct. The prints were huge, probably size 13 or 14. And they were deep, like whoever made them was heavy or walking hard. "Has to be a prank," Brooke said, her breath fogging in front of her face. "Someone from Deadhorse messing with us." But the prints didn't come from the road. They came from the north, from the empty tundra where nothing lived for 100 miles except maybe some caribou and the occasional polar bear. And there were no returning prints. Whoever or whatever made them had walked a circle around our shed and then continued north into the darkness. "We should call it in," Tatiana said quietly. She was hugging herself despite her heavy coat. Henrik shook his head. "Call in what? Footprints? They'll think we're losing it." He studied the tracks for another moment, then turned back toward the station. "Probably some drunk from town wandered out here and didn't realize where he was. Let's just keep an eye out." I wanted to believe him. The thing was, I'd been out to the shed the day before, and I would have noticed these prints then, which meant they were less than 24 hours old. Nobody survives that cold barefoot for any length of time, let alone long enough to walk from Dead Horse and back. That night, I couldn't sleep. My room faced north, and I kept looking out the window into the darkness. The moon was nearly full, turning the snowfield into this pale landscape that looked like it belonged on another planet. Around 2 in the morning, I thought I saw something moving out there. Just a shadow crossing the snow, too far away to make out details. It moved strangely, too smooth, like it was gliding rather than walking. I rubbed my eyes. We all got a little weird during the polar night. The constant darkness messed with your head, made you see things that weren't there. I went back to bed and eventually drifted off. The next day, Marcus found more prints. These were closer, right up against the building. They stopped at the window of the storage room, then continued around to the generator room, then headed back north. Same barefoot prints, same impossible depth in the snow. "It was here last night," Marcus said. His voice was tight, while we were sleeping. "We checked everything. All the doors were locked from the inside. No windows broken, nothing missing or moved. Whatever it was had just walked around the building and left." Henrik radioed Dead Horse and asked if anyone had reported a missing person. They hadn't. He described the situation, and the guy on the other end laughed, told him to lay off the whiskey. Henrik didn't push it. That night, I volunteered to stay up and watch. I stationed myself in the common room with all the lights off so I could see outside without being seen. I had my phone ready to film anything unusual. The others went to bed, though I don't think anyone was really sleeping. Around 1 in the morning, I saw it. It came from the north, walking steadily toward the station. At first, I thought it was a person in white clothing, but as it got closer, I realized it wasn't wearing anything. It was just pale, skin so white it almost glowed in the moonlight. And it was tall, maybe 7 feet, with long arms that hung too low. Its legs moved in a steady rhythm, never hurrying, never slowing. I reached for my phone, but my hands were shaking so badly I dropped it. When I looked up again, the thing was closer. It stopped about 30 feet from the building, right at the edge of the floodlight's reach. That's when I saw its face. It didn't have one. Where the features should have been, there was just smooth, pale skin. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a blank oval like an unfinished sculpture. I don't know how long I sat there frozen. The thing stood perfectly still, facing the building. Facing me even though it had no eyes. I could feel it looking at me. Then it tilted its head. The movement was too fluid, too controlled, like its neck was on ball bearings instead of vertebrae. It raised one arm and pointed at the window, at me. My mouth had gone completely dry. I tried to call out for the others, but my voice wouldn't work. The thing held that position for what felt like an hour, but was probably only seconds. Then it lowered its arm, turned, and walked back north into the darkness with that same measured pace. I managed to stand up, my legs almost giving out. I ran to Henrik's room and pounded on his door until he opened it, angry and confused. I tried to explain what I'd seen, but the words came out jumbled. He thought I'd had a nightmare. "Come look at the snow," I finally managed. "There will be prints." We went outside with flashlights. The footprints were there, exactly where I'd seen it. They came from the north, stopped where the thing had stood and returned north. And right where it had pointed at me, someone had drawn a symbol in the snow, a circle with lines radiating from the center like a compass rose, except there were too many lines, maybe 15 or 20 of them. Henrik stopped talking about pranks after that. We decided to leave in the morning. We'd pack essentials, take the snow vehicles, and head to Dead Horse. We could say there was equipment failure or whatever. Nobody argued. Even Henrik, who'd spent his career in remote stations, looked shaken, but we didn't make it to morning. Around 4 a.m. the power died. All of it, lights, heat, everything. Marcus went to check the generators, and I heard him scream. We all rushed to the generator room and found him staring at the machines. Someone had methodically disconnected every cable, unscrewed every connection. The work was precise, careful. And the door had been locked from the inside when he opened it. "We're leaving now," Henrik said. "Right now." We grabbed our coats and emergency supplies and ran to the vehicle shed. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see that pale figure, but there was only darkness. The cold bit through my coat immediately. We hadn't had time to properly layer up. Marcus got the first snow vehicle started, and we piled in. Brooke was crying. Tatiana was muttering something in Russian. Henrik drove, pushing the vehicle as fast as it would go toward Dead Horse. We'd gone maybe 2 miles when we saw them. At least a dozen of those things standing in a line across the road, all pale and blank-faced and too tall. They just stood there, not moving as we approached. Henrik didn't slow down. He aimed right for the gap between 2 of them and we punched through. One of them reached out as we passed, and I swear it touched the side of the vehicle. I heard nails or claws scraping across metal. We made it to Dead Horse. The guy at the gas station thought we were drunk or high until we showed him the scratches on the vehicle. 4 parallel lines gouged deep into the metal, impossible to fake. A state trooper went out to the station the next day with a deputy. They found everything exactly as we'd left it, generators disconnected, that symbol in the snow, but no footprints except ours from the night before. Everything else had been swept clean by the wind, they said. We were offered counseling. I quit and moved back to Seattle. I heard Henrik went back to Norway. Last I checked, the station was still operating with a new crew who probably don't know what happened. Maybe nothing happens to them. Maybe those things only come when they want to. I look at the calendar differently now. When November comes and the days get short, I feel this pressure in my chest, like something else watching and waiting for the darkness to be complete. Seattle doesn't get polar night, but I still don't trust what might be standing outside my window when the sun goes down. And sometimes, when I'm lying in bed, I remember that faceless thing pointing at me. I never figured out what it wanted. I don't think I want to know. Story 2. My Uncle Bernard left me his cabin near Weissman when he passed. I'd been there once as a kid, maybe 15 years earlier, and barely remembered it. The lawyer said the place was remote but functional, and since I was between jobs and had nowhere particular to be, I figured I'd go up and check it out. Maybe spend a few weeks getting it ready to sell. Weissman is barely a town, maybe 14 people year-round, tucked into the Brooks Range where the Koyukuk River runs. In January, it's as dark as anywhere on Earth. The sun doesn't show up at all for about a month. I flew into Fairbanks, rented a truck, and drove north. The road turned to gravel after a while, then to packed snow. My GPS stopped working around mile 60. The cabin sat about 3 miles outside Weissman proper, up a winding trail that my truck barely managed. It was small, 1 room with a loft, a wood stove, shelves packed with canned food and supplies. Uncle Bernard had been the type to prepare for anything. There was a generator out back, fuel drums, even a satellite phone mounted on the wall. The place was cold as a tomb but solid. I got the wood stove going and started taking inventory. Uncle Bernard had left notebooks everywhere, filled with his cramped handwriting. Most of it was boring stuff, dates, weather observations, animal sightings. But one notebook kept separately in a drawer was different. The entries were shorter, more personal. December 14th, heard it again last night. Closer this time. December 19th, found the markers, 3 of them arranged in a triangle 100 yards east. I should have left when I had the chance. December 23rd, it knows my name now. It speaks with Catherine's voice. Catherine had been his wife. She died 5 years before him. I felt cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. I flipped through more pages, but they were mostly blank. The last entry was dated January 6th, almost exactly 1 year ago. If you're reading this, get out. Don't stay for the whole night. It comes when the darkness is complete. I told myself he'd just been lonely, maybe a little senile. Old men living alone in the wilderness got strange ideas. But I put the notebook back in the drawer and made sure the satellite phone was charged. That first night I heard it, a voice outside calling my name, Riley, stretched out and hollow. I knew it wasn't real. There was nobody out there, but hearing it still made my stomach drop. I stayed inside, kept the fire going, and eventually fell asleep in my chair. Morning came, though morning is a loose term when the sun doesn't rise. There was a period of twilight around noon when things got slightly less dark, more gray than black. I went outside to check the generator and saw them immediately. 3 markers, arranged in a triangle, about 100 yards east, just like Uncle Bernard had written. They were made of stacked stones, each about 3 feet high. They looked old, weathered, covered in frost. I walked over to get a closer look and saw that someone had carved symbols into the top stone of each pile. Not letters, just patterns, spirals, and lines that hurt to look at. I tried to tell myself maybe Uncle Bernard had built them or they were some kind of Inuit monument, but I didn't really believe it. I kicked one of the piles over, which in retrospect was probably stupid. The stones scattered across the snow. That night, the voice came back. But this time it was different. It was my mother's voice, calling me like she used to when I was a kid and dinner was ready. Riley, time to come inside. Riley, it's getting dark. My mother lived in Portland. She was fine. I'd talked to her 2 days ago, but the voice sounded exactly like her, down to the slight rasp she got from years of smoking. It came from somewhere past the tree line, maybe 50 yards out. I grabbed a flashlight and opened the door. I don't know why, I knew it wasn't her. But something about hearing her voice made me need to check to be sure. "Mom," I called into the darkness. The voice came again, closer now. "Riley, come here, I need to show you something." I stepped off the porch, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The snow crunched under my boots. I could see the tree line now, the black silhouettes of spruce trees against the slightly less black sky. Something moved between the trees, something pale and hunched. It was watching me. I couldn't see details, just a shape that was wrong, too tall when it stood, too low when it crouched. "Riley, don't be afraid." My mother's voice again, but now I could tell it was wrong. The words were right, but the rhythm was off, like someone reading phonetically from a script. I backed toward the cabin, not turning around, keeping my light on the trees. The shape followed, staying just at the edge of the beam. I saw an arm too long, fingers that branched like twigs. I saw what might have been a head, featureless and smooth. I made it to the porch and slammed the door through the bolt. My hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries. The voice kept calling, kept using my mother's words, but it was getting less accurate. The sentences started to break up, words in the wrong order. "Riley, come, it's time, dark, getting inside, Riley." Then it stopped, complete silence except for the crackling of the fire. I sat in the chair with the satellite phone in my lap, trying to decide if I was crazy enough to call for help. What would I even say? That something was imitating my mom's voice, that I'd seen a shape in the trees. Around midnight, something scratched at the door. Not knocking, scratching, like fingernails or claws dragging slowly down the wood. It went on for maybe 5 minutes, then stopped, then started again at the window. Then at the back wall. I grabbed Uncle Bernard's rifle from above the fireplace. I didn't know if bullets would do anything, but holding it made me feel slightly less helpless. The scratching continued, moving around the cabin in a slow circle. Then I heard the voice again, but this time it was Uncle Bernard's voice. "Riley, open the door. It's cold out here. Let me in." "You're dead," I said out loud, not sure why I was responding. "That's right," the voice said, perfectly calm. "That's why I need to come inside. Open the door, Riley, just for a moment." The scratching got louder, more insistent. I heard the wood starting to splinter around the door frame. Whatever was out there was strong, patient, and it had all night. I made a decision. I grabbed my coat, my keys, Uncle Bernard's rifle, and the satellite phone. I threw what food I could into a pack. Then I went to the back window, the one that faced away from where the scratching was coming from, and smashed it with the rifle butt. I climbed through, fell into the snow, scrambled to my feet, and ran for the truck. The scratching stopped immediately. I could hear something moving around the cabin toward me, fast now, no longer patient. The truck started on the first try, thank God. I threw it in reverse and floored it, not caring that I was going backward down a narrow trail in pitch darkness. Something pale darted past the headlights, there and gone in an instant. I made it to the main trail, got turned around, and drove toward Weissman without stopping. I didn't look in the mirrors. I didn't want to know if something was following me. The guy at the only open building in Weissman, a supply store that doubled as a bar, took one look at me and poured a whiskey without asking. I tried to explain what happened, but he held up a hand. "Your uncle's place," he said. It wasn't a question, I nodded. "You're the fourth one," he said quietly. "Your uncle was the third. There was a couple before him, lasted 2 nights. And before that, an old mining camp used to be out that way. They all cleared out in 1952 after a bad winter. Didn't take anything with them, just left." "What is it?" I asked. He shrugged. "Something that doesn't like to be alone in the dark. Something that wants company." He poured himself a drink. "Your uncle thought he could figure it out, thought he could outlast it. He was there for 11 winters before it got him. They found him outside, halfway to the tree line. Official cause was exposure, but he didn't finish. I sold the property through the lawyer, never went back. Someone bought it anyway, someone from outside who probably thought they were getting a deal on remote Alaska land. I hope they never spend a night there during the polar night. The worst part isn't what I saw or heard. The worst part is that sometimes, when it's very quiet and very dark, I still hear my mother's voice calling me. And I know it's not her, but I also know that somewhere in the darkness, something learned my name and it hasn't forgotten." A story 3. I took the job at the Aurora station because the pay was absurd and I needed the money. My student loans weren't going to pay themselves, and 3 months of isolation for $50,000 seemed like a fair trade. The station was a tourist observatory about 40 miles north of Coldfoot. Wealthy people would fly in during the winter to watch the northern lights from heated domes. My job was caretaker during the off-season, keeping systems running until they reopened in November. The timing was tight. I'd be there from late October through January, right through the deepest part of the polar night. But the station manager, Victoria Cross, assured me everything was automated. I'd just be there to check gauges and make sure nothing froze. Easy money. The station was bigger than I expected. 3 domes connected by heated tunnels, staff quarters, a kitchen, a communication center. It had been a mining facility decades ago before someone bought it and converted it. The domes had these huge glass panels in the ceiling for viewing the aurora. During the day, or what passed for day, you could see mountains in every direction. Victoria flew back out on the helicopter after showing me around, and then I was alone, truly alone. The nearest person was probably 40 miles south, and even the radio was only for emergencies. I had satellite internet, a library of downloaded movies, and enough food for 6 months. I thought I'd go crazy from boredom, not fear. The first week was fine. I fell into a routine, checking systems in the morning, exercising in the afternoon, cooking elaborate meals for something to do. I video called my girlfriend, Stephanie, every evening. She was jealous of the solitude. I was a little jealous of her having sunlight. The second week, the darkness became complete. The sun stopped rising entirely, and the twilight period shrank to a faint glow on the southern horizon for an hour around noon. The rest was black. The stars were incredible, though so many you couldn't see the constellations anymore, just sheets of light. And the aurora came almost every night, green and purple curtains that made the snow glow. I started seeing the lights during my system checks. Little flickers at the edge of my vision, usually in Dome C, the farthest from the main facility. I'd turn to look and there'd be nothing there. I figured it was my eyes adjusting to the darkness, or maybe some electrical issue with the aurora viewing system. But the lights got more persistent. I'd be in Dome C checking the heating system and see a glow in my peripheral vision, blue-white, like someone was shining a flashlight through the glass ceiling. Except when I looked up, there was only stars. Third week, I found the door. I'd been at the station for 18 days and thought I'd explored every room. But in the back of the storage area behind the kitchen, past the shelves of canned goods and emergency supplies, there was a door I'd somehow missed. It was old, not like the modern industrial doors in the rest of the facility. This was wood, thick and scarred, with an ancient padlock that had rusted through. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and found stairs leading down. The smell that came up was wrong, mineral and cold, like deep earth. I got a flashlight and descended. The stairs went down about 30 feet into a natural cave. The walls were rough stone, glistening with frost. At the bottom was a large chamber, maybe 40 feet across, and in the center of the chamber was a well. It was perfectly circular, about 6 feet across, lined with stones that looked far older than the facility above. There was no cover, no safety railing. I walked to the edge and pointed my flashlight down. The well went deep. My light didn't reach the bottom, just illuminated stone walls that dropped straight down into darkness. I picked up a small rock and dropped it in, listening for the splash or impact. I never heard it land. I stood there for probably 5 minutes, just staring down into that darkness. Something about it made my skin crawl. I thought about Uncle Bernard's notebook back in that cabin. It comes when the darkness is complete. I went back upstairs, closed the door, and dragged a shelf unit in front of it. That night I heard singing. It was faint, like it was coming from very far away, but it was definitely singing. A woman's voice, wordless, just melody. It would swell for a few moments, then fade, then come back. I checked every room in the facility, thinking maybe I'd left a radio on or something, but I couldn't find the source. The singing was coming from below, from that well. I called Victoria on the emergency line and asked her about the door, the stairs, the well. There was a long pause. "You opened it," she said finally. "It was already open. Why didn't you tell me about it?" Another pause. The previous caretaker was supposed to seal it. He assured me he did. She sounded stressed, which was new. Victoria usually had this unflappable corporate calm. "Listen to me very carefully, Daniel. Do not go down there again. Keep that door blocked. The singing will stop in a few days." "What is it?" I asked. "It's old," she said. "Older than the mine, older than the facility. When they were excavating for the original mining operation, they found the well. They tried to map it, but their equipment failed. They tried to fill it in, but whatever they dropped just kept falling. Eventually they built around it and tried to forget about it." That doesn't answer my question. Because I don't have an answer, Victoria said. I just know that when the darkness is complete, you don't go near that well. You keep it sealed and you stay in the upper levels. Can you do that? I said yes, I didn't have much choice. The singing continued every night. I tried to ignore it, but it was getting louder. And sometimes I'd hear other sounds mixed in with the melody, whispers, words I couldn't quite make out, rhythms that didn't match any language I knew. On the 23rd night, the lights in Dome C started flickering. I went to check the breaker and found the dome full of that blue-white light. It was coming from the well. I could see the glow seeping up through the floor, through the seams and cracks. The singing was much louder now, multiple voices harmonizing. Something was rising from the well. I stood frozen in the tunnel connecting to Dome C, watching as the light grew brighter. The air temperature dropped fast. I could see my breath, then ice started forming on the walls. The singing reached a crescendo, and then something appeared in the center of the dome. It was a woman, or shaped like one. She was luminous, translucent, like she was made of the northern lights themselves, shifting colors, green and purple and blue flowing across her form. She was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Her face kept changing, never settling on one expression. Her eyes were hollow, dark spaces in the light. She saw me. I know she did, even though she had no real eyes. Her head turned toward where I stood in the tunnel, and her mouth opened. The singing stopped. When she spoke, her voice echoed like it was coming from the bottom of the well and the top of the sky at the same time. You opened the door. I couldn't speak. My vocal cords had stopped working. We have been down so long, she said. In the dark, in the deep, waiting for the endless night. She drifted toward me, moving without walking, her form rippling. You let the light in, you called us up. I didn't mean to, I managed to whisper. Intent doesn't matter. She was closer now, and I could feel the cold radiating from her. It wasn't normal cold, it was the absence of warmth, the cold of deep space and deep earth. We rise when the dark is complete and the door stands open. This has always been the way. Behind her, more lights were emerging from the floor. More figures, each unique, each impossible. Some were human-shaped, some were not, all glowing with that aurora light. I ran, just turned and sprinted back through the tunnel toward the main facility. Behind me, I heard the singing resume, louder now, triumphant. The lights chased me, flowing through the tunnels like water. I made it to the communications center and hit the emergency beacon. Then I grabbed my survival gear, smashed out a window, and ran into the darkness outside. The temperature was -40. I had maybe an hour before exposure got me, but I'd rather freeze than face what was in that facility. I made it about a mile before I collapsed. The cold was shutting down my body, making my thoughts slow and confused. I lay in the snow looking up at the aurora, massive curtains of green and purple dancing across the sky, and I realized they were moving in rhythm with the singing I could still hear from the station. The helicopter found me somehow. Victoria had sent it the moment she got my beacon. I was barely conscious when they loaded me up. As we lifted off, I looked down at the Aurora station. Every dome was glowing from within, pulsing with that blue-white light. And I could see figures moving inside, dozens of them, dancing in patterns that hurt to watch. They shut down the station permanently. Officially, it was due to structural damage from ice. Victoria paid me the full 50,000 plus a bonus and made me sign so many NDAs I lost count. I took the money and moved to Arizona, as far from darkness and cold as I could get, but I still see them sometimes. When the northern lights are strong enough, they show up even in the south, faint curtains of green on the horizon. And when I see them, I remember that singing, and I wonder what's still down in that well, waiting for someone else to open the door during the endless night. I found something in my coat pocket later, after I'd recovered. A small stone, perfectly smooth, with a spiral carved into it. I don't remember picking it up. I certainly didn't take it from the well chamber, but somehow it followed me out. I keep it in a box in my closet, wrapped in cloth. Sometimes, on very dark nights, I swear I can hear it singing. Story 4. The ice road truckers are a weird breed, and I say that as someone who drove those roads for 6 seasons. You have to be a little off to spend months in the darkness hauling freight across frozen lakes and tundra, but the money's good enough that you learn to tolerate the isolation, the cold, and the occasional brush with death when the ice shifts under your wheels. I was driving the Dalton Highway route in late December, hauling drilling equipment from Fairbanks to a site near Galbraith Lake. It's a 3-day run if the weather cooperates, sleeping in the truck at designated pull-offs. The polar night was in full effect, no sun, just perpetual darkness with a few hours of twilight if you were lucky. The thing about the Dalton is that it's one of the most isolated roads on Earth. You might see another truck every few hours if traffic's busy, but mostly it's just you and the darkness. No cell service. Radio signals spotty. If something goes wrong, you handle it yourself or you wait for the next truck to come along. I'd made the run dozens of times. I knew every curve, every pull-off, every sight line. So when I saw the truck parked on the side of the road near mile marker 267, I knew something was off. Nobody parks there. It's an exposed stretch with no shelter from the wind. I slowed down and pulled up behind it. The truck was a Peterbilt, similar to mine, covered in frost. Its running lights were on, engine 2, I could see exhaust coming from the stack, but no movement inside the cab. I grabbed my flashlight and walked up to the driver's side. The door was locked. I knocked, but nobody responded. I cupped my hands and looked through the window. The cab was empty, not just empty of people, empty of everything. No sleeping bag, no thermos, no personal items, just the seat and the controls, like it had rolled off the factory floor and driven itself to this spot. I tried the passenger door, also locked. I walked around the truck checking for damage, trying to figure out what was going on. The trailer was loaded with something. I could tell by how it sat on the suspension, but there was no manifest, no company markings, nothing. I was about to call it in on the radio when I noticed the footprints. They led away from the driver's door, out into the tundra heading east. Just one set, from boots similar to mine. They walked away in a straight line toward nothing. No shelter, no settlement, just empty darkness. I followed them with my flashlight. They went about 50 yards perfectly straight, and then they stopped. Just ended like whoever made them had been picked up and carried away. The last print was as clear as the first, toes pointed east, and then nothing but undisturbed snow. I stood there for a while trying to make sense of it. The temperature was around -25. Even if someone was having a mental breakdown, they wouldn't get far on foot. Search and rescue would find a body within 100 yards, not nothing. I went back to my truck and called it in. The dispatcher, Frank Paulson, sounded tired. "What's the unit number?" I walked back and checked. There was no unit number, no dot markings, no plate, nothing. "There's no ID on it," I said. Long silence on the radio. "Say again." "The truck has no identification, and the cab is empty. I mean completely empty. No gear, no personal items, but the engine's running and there are footprints leading east that just stop." Another silence. Then Frank said, "Get back in your truck, Aaron. Drive away. Don't stop until you reach Coldfoot." "What? Just do it now." Something in his voice made me listen. I climbed back in my cab, pulled around the mysterious truck, and kept driving. In my mirror, I could see it receding in the darkness, its lights still on, still running. I made it to Coldfoot around midnight. Frank was waiting at the truck stop, which was unusual. Dispatchers don't usually come out to meet drivers. He bought me coffee and we sat in the corner of the empty diner. "You're not the first to see that truck," he said quietly. "It's been reported 6 times in the last 4 years. Always in winter, always during the polar night. Always parked in different spots between mile marker 265 and 270. "What is it?" I asked. Frank rubbed his face. "I don't know, but every driver who's seen it says the same thing. Empty cab, footprints that stop, no identification. State troopers have gone to look twice. By the time they get there, it's gone. No tire tracks leaving, no sign it was ever there." "That's impossible." "Yeah," he stared into his coffee. "There's a story the old-timers tell. Back in '78, a driver named Eugene Mallory was hauling fuel in the winter when his truck went through the ice on one of the lakes. They never recovered the body or the truck. Too deep, too dangerous. His wife said he called her on the CB radio as he was sinking, said he wasn't ready to go, said he'd find a way back. I felt cold that had nothing to do with the temperature outside. You think that was his truck? I think something wants drivers to follow those footprints," Frank said. "And I think you were smart to call it in instead of trying to be a hero." I finished my delivery and drove back south. When I passed mile marker 267, there was nothing there. No truck, no tire tracks, no footprints, just empty road and darkness. I kept driving for 3 more seasons, but I never took a run during polar night again. I told myself it was about the money. Daylight runs paid almost as well. But really, I didn't want to see that truck again. I didn't want to know what would happen if I followed those footprints out into the darkness. Last year, another driver went missing on the Dalton near mile marker 268. They found his truck parked on the shoulder, engine running, cab empty. There were footprints leading east. Search and rescue followed them for 100 yards before they stopped. They never found the driver. And 6 months later, someone reported a truck parked near mile marker 267. Empty cab, footprints leading east, engine running. Frank called me after that. "You were smart to get out," he said. "Some things don't want to be alone in the dark. They want company, even if they have to trick you into joining them." I live in Sacramento now, driving local routes where the sun always rises. But sometimes when I'm driving at night and I see headlights in my mirror, I get this feeling in my stomach. And I have to check, have to make sure there's someone in that cab behind me. Someone real, because I know what's driving on the Dalton Highway during the polar night. And it's not alive, but it's very, very patient, and it's still looking for company. The story 5. The village of Anaktuvuk Pass is one of the most remote places in Alaska, 200 miles north of Fairbanks, deep in the Brooks Range, accessible only by plane. I went there as a medical contractor, filling in for their usual doctor who'd had a family emergency. 3 weeks, they said, just handle basics, and if anything serious comes up, medevac to Fairbanks. I flew in on a tiny plane that felt like a tin can with wings. The pilot, Gregory Walsh, pointed out landmarks as we flew, frozen rivers, mountain passes, absolutely nothing for miles in every direction. The village appeared suddenly, a small cluster of buildings huddled against the mountains. Population, about 300, mostly Nunamiut Inupiat who'd lived there for generations. The clinic was small but well equipped. I met with the outgoing doctor, Sandra Okoye, who briefed me on the usual cases: frostbite, minor accidents, the occasional respiratory infection. She seemed eager to leave, kept checking her watch. "One thing," she said as she was packing, "if anyone comes in talking about the walker, just give them something to help them sleep and call me." "The walker?" She paused at the door. "It's a local story. Shows up sometimes during the polar night. They'll tell you they saw something out on the tundra. Just treat it as stress-induced hallucination." She left before I could ask more questions. The first week was routine. I saw patients, prescribed medications, treated a kid who'd burned his hand on a stove. The villagers were friendly but reserved, which I expected. I was an outsider here temporarily. They were polite but distant. The second week, Thomas Kavina came to the clinic. He was maybe 60, one of the village elders. He sat in my exam room and didn't say anything for a while, just looked at his hands. "I saw it last night," he finally said. "The walker, he was standing near the airstrip." I remembered Sandra's advice. "Can you describe what you saw?" "Tall," he said. "Maybe 8 feet, walking on 2 legs, but the legs bend wrong. It was just standing there, watching the village. I went inside to get my rifle, and when I came back, it was gone." "How far away was it?" 200 yards, maybe. Too far to shoot accurately in the dark, but close enough to see." He looked at me. "You don't believe me." "I believe you saw something," I said carefully. "Could it have been a bear? They can look very tall when they stand up." He shook his head. "I know what a bear looks like. This wasn't a bear, and bears don't come to the village in winter." I gave him a mild sedative and told him to get some rest. He took the pills but gave me this look, not angry, just disappointed that I was like all the other outsiders who thought they knew better. 2 days later, another patient came in with the same story. Then another. All of them had seen the walker, tall, wrong proportions, standing at the edge of the village watching. Always at night, always alone. None of them seemed crazy. They were scared. On the 15th night, I saw it myself. I was working late at the clinic, catching up on paperwork. Around 10 p.m., I looked out the window and saw something standing near the community hall. At first, I thought it was a person, just someone out for a walk. But they weren't moving, just standing there facing the clinic. I grabbed a flashlight and went outside. The cold hit me immediately, -40 probably. Nobody stays outside at that temperature unless they have to. "Hello," I called out. "Do you need medical help?" The figure didn't respond. It was too dark to see details, just a silhouette against the slightly less dark sky. But Thomas was right. It was tall, very tall, and something about the proportions was wrong. The legs were too long, the torso too short. I started walking toward it, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. I got maybe 30 feet away when I finally saw it clearly. It wasn't human. The shape was roughly human, but the details were all wrong. The legs were thin as branches, but somehow supporting a massive upper body. The arms hung down past where knees should be, and the head was elongated, stretched vertically like someone had pulled taffy. There was no face that I could see, just smooth darkness. It took a step toward me. The movement was fluid but wrong, like it had too many joints. The legs bent backward at the knee, then forward, then backward again. I backed away, flashlight shaking in my hand. The thing took another step, matching my pace. It wasn't rushing, wasn't aggressive, just walking toward me in that impossible way. I turned and ran back to the clinic, slammed the door, locked it. I looked out the window. The thing was still there, standing where I'd left it. Just watching. I called Thomas Kavina. He answered on the first ring like he'd been expecting it. "You saw it," he said, not a question. "Yes, though." "Then you believe now." "I don't know what I believe. What is it?" Long pause. "The elders say it's been here longer than the village, longer than the Nunamiut. It walks the darkness during the winter, watching. Usually it stays far away, out on the tundra, but sometimes it comes close. It doesn't hurt anyone, but..." He trailed off. "But what?" "But people who stare at it too long start walking out into the darkness. They follow it. We find them later, frozen, miles from the village. They have this peaceful look on their faces, like they're sleeping." I looked out the window again. The thing was gone. The next morning, I found footprints in the snow outside the clinic. They started at where the walker had been standing and led away from the village toward the north. Each print was huge, maybe 2 feet long and narrow. They didn't look like any animal I knew. The prints walked in a straight line for about a quarter mile. Then they stopped. Just ended in the middle of undisturbed snow, like the thing had lifted off the ground and flown away. I took photos, measured the prints, tried to document everything. But looking at the photos later, they didn't capture what I'd seen. They just looked like odd shapes in the snow, meaningless. The walker came back 3 more times before my contract ended. Always at night, always watching from a distance. Other villagers saw it too. We didn't talk about it much. What was there to say? It was there, it watched, it left. Nobody got hurt. But one of the villagers, a young guy named Jeremy Cusack, became obsessed with it. He'd stay up all night watching for it, trying to photograph it. He told me he could hear it calling him, saying his name in a voice like wind over ice. On my last night in the village, Jeremy went missing. We found his tracks leading north, following the walker's prints. Search and rescue looked for 3 days but never found him. The tracks just went on and on into the darkness, 2 sets side by side, until the wind erased them. I flew out on schedule. From the air, I looked down at the tundra, millions of acres of white nothing. I thought about Jeremy out there somewhere, walking beside something that shouldn't exist. I wondered if he was still walking or if he'd finally stopped. Thomas Cavina emailed me a month later. They'd found Jeremy's body 5 miles north of the village. He'd frozen to death, but like Thomas said, he looked peaceful, content. And his tracks showed he'd been walking steadily the whole time, never wavering, never falling, just walking into the darkness until his body gave out. The autopsy showed nothing unusual, but in his pocket they found a small piece of ivory carved into a shape, long legs, elongated head, no arms. The carving was old, ancient maybe. They'd never seen Jeremy with it before. I practice medicine in Juneau now, where the winter nights are long, but not endless. But I think about Anaktuvuk Pass sometimes, and I wonder if the walker is still there, standing at the edge of the village during the polar night. Still watching, still waiting for someone to follow it into the darkness. And I wonder what happens if you walk far enough. Where do you end up? What do you see? Jeremy looked peaceful when they found him. Maybe he saw something worth dying for, but I don't plan to find out. Some questions don't need answers. Some darkness is better left unexplored. A story 6. The research vessel Alana Mitchell was contracted by the University of Alaska to study sea ice formation in the Beaufort Sea during the polar night. I was part of a 5-person crew, 2 scientists, 2 crew members, and me as the ship's engineer. We'd anchor in the pack ice for 2 weeks, take samples, run tests, then head back to Barrow. Straightforward work, good pay, and I'd done similar expeditions before. What made this trip different was the location. We were anchoring near Brownlow Point, which had a reputation among the locals. The Inupiat called it the place where things don't rest. They warned us not to stay overnight, said the ice there was wrong. But scientists don't listen to folklore, and the ice conditions were perfect for the study. We anchored on December 19th, about a mile offshore. The sun had been gone for weeks, and the darkness was total except for the aurora and our ship's lights. The sea ice extended in every direction, broken by occasional lades of black water that steamed in the cold. Dr. Isabel Tran was the lead researcher, a glaciologist from Seattle. Her partner was Dr. Noah Borgman, who studied ice chemistry. The crew was Captain John Young and First Mate Cameron Ross. We all had our roles, our routines. The first 3 days were normal. On the 4th day, Cameron heard the knocking. We were having dinner in the galley when he held up his hand. "You hear that?" We listened. There it was, a rhythmic tapping on the hull like someone knocking on a door. Tap, tap, tap. Pause, tap, tap, tap. "Ice shifting," John said. "Normal." But the knocking continued for hours, always the same rhythm, always in the same spot on the starboard hull. Cameron went down to the engine room to check, came back shaking his head. "It's not ice," he said. "It's too regular, too deliberate." That night, I was checking the generators when I heard it clearly. Tap, tap, tap. Right below me on the other side of the hull. I put my hand against the metal and felt the vibration. Tap, tap, tap. Pause, tap, tap, tap. I grabbed a wrench and tapped back 3 times. The knocking stopped immediately, then it responded. 3 taps, fast, deliberate. My skin went cold. I backed away from the hull and went to find John. "Something's down there," I told him, "under the ice, and it's responding." He grabbed a spotlight and we went out on deck. The temperature was -30, maybe colder with wind chill. We shined the light down at the ice next to the hull. Something moved under there. We could see it through the ice, a dark shape, too large to be a seal, moving parallel to the ship. Then it stopped directly below us. The ice was about 3 feet thick. Through it we could see a pale shape pressed against the underside. It looked like a hand, huge, with too many fingers, each finger too long. It pressed against the ice, like it was trying to push through. John and I backed away. The hand stayed there for maybe 30 seconds, then slowly withdrew into the darkness below. "What the fuck was that?" John whispered. We woke the others and told them what we'd seen. Isabel was skeptical until we showed her. The hand came back around 2 a.m., pressing against the ice in the same spot. We all watched this time. "It's not possible," Isabel said. "Nothing that large lives under the ice here, nothing with hands." But there it was, pressing against the ice. 5 fingers, no 6. They moved independently, flexing and extending. The palm was massive, maybe 3 feet across. Noah suggested we drill through and take a sample. John immediately vetoed that idea. "We're not cutting a hole near that thing," he said firmly. The hand withdrew, and then the knocking started again all around the ship now. On the starboard hull, the port hull underneath. Tap, tap, tap. A dozen different spots, all synchronized. Like the thing was enormous, surrounding us. We tried to start the engines and leave, but they wouldn't turn over. John spent 3 hours in the engine room trying to figure it out. Everything checked out fine, fuel, electrical, starter. The engines just wouldn't fire. "We are stuck until morning," he finally announced. "Or until this ice shifts enough that we can drift." That night was the longest of my life. The knocking continued, sometimes soft, sometimes hard enough to rattle dishes in the galley. We all stayed together in the bridge, watching the ice. Around 4 a.m., Cameron pointed. "Look." Something was emerging from a lade about 50 yards away. It rose slowly from the black water, pale and glistening. At first I thought it was an iceberg, but icebergs don't move like that. This was deliberate, controlled. It kept rising. A head appeared, long and narrow, with no features I could recognize, then shoulders, arms that hung down into the water. It was huge, maybe 20 feet tall, and it just stood there in the water, half submerged, facing our ship. We could see it clearly in our spotlights. The skin was pale gray, smooth like whale skin, but wrong somehow. The arms were too long, reaching almost to the waterline. And the hands, those hands had too many fingers, just like we'd seen through the ice. It watched us. I don't know how I knew it was watching since it had no eyes I could see, but I felt it. We all did. "Nobody move," John whispered, like it could hear us. The thing raised one arm slowly and pointed at the ship, at us. The fingers spread wide, all 6 of them. Then it sank back into the water, disappearing beneath the ice. The knocking stopped. Complete silence except for the wind. Did that just... No, I couldn't finish the sentence. The engine started on the first try. John didn't waste time. He powered up and broke us out of the ice, heading south at full speed. Nobody argued. The research could wait. Everything could wait. We radioed the Coast Guard and tried to explain what we'd seen, but it sounded insane even to us. They logged it as a wildlife encounter and told us to report to Barrow for debriefing. When we examined the hull later, we found marks, dozens of them, all along the waterline. Long scratches in groups of 6, each mark about 2 inches wide and 4 feet long, like something had been running its fingers along the ship. The university classified our expedition as unsuccessful due to equipment failure. They never sent another ship to Brownlow Point. The Inupiat weren't surprised. "We told you not to stay overnight," one elder said. "The ice there is old. The things beneath it are older." I transferred to work on inland vessels after that. Rivers, lakes, anywhere the water isn't deep enough for whatever that was. Sometimes I think about it down there in the darkness, swimming under the polar ice, waiting, knocking. And I wonder how many other ships have heard that knocking over the years. How many heard it and thought it was just ice shifting, just normal sounds. How many never realized they were being watched from below. John had nightmares for months after. He kept dreaming that we hadn't escaped, that the thing had come aboard. In his dreams, he'd wake up and go to the bridge, and that pale creature would be standing there, head bent to fit through the doorway, those 2 long fingers reaching for him. I don't dream about it, but sometimes when I'm near water at night, I listen. And if I hear knocking, rhythmic, deliberate, patient, I walk away, because I know what's making that sound, and I know it's still waiting. A story 7. My sister Elena inherited the research cabin near Point Lonely from our grandfather, who'd been a biologist studying Arctic wildlife. The cabin had been empty for 3 years since his death, and Elena decided we should go up and clear it out before selling. She needed my help hauling stuff out, and I needed a break from my job, so I agreed. Point Lonely is well named. It's a spit of land jutting into the Beaufort Sea, one of the most isolated spots in Alaska. The cabin was about 2 miles from the nearest settlement, accessible by snowmobile during winter. We flew into Wainwright, rented machines, and headed out in late December. The polar night was complete. The sun had been gone for 3 weeks and wouldn't return for another month. We had headlamps, flashlights, and the aurora to see by. Elena was excited, talking about childhood summers at the cabin, but I barely remembered the place. I'd only visited once as a kid. The cabin was small but solid, built to withstand Arctic storms. Inside was cluttered with decades of our grandfather's research, notebooks, specimen jars, equipment, boxes everywhere. It would take at least 3 days to sort through everything. We settled in the first night, got the generator running and the propane heater going. Elena cooked soup while I started organizing boxes. Most of it was scientific equipment, weather data, old photographs, normal stuff. Then I found the journal. It was separate from the other notebooks, kept in a locked drawer in our grandfather's desk. The lock had rusted through and the drawer opened easily. The journal was leather-bound, filled with our grandfather's handwriting, but unlike his research notes, this was personal. December 8th, saw it again tonight. Same spot, same behavior, standing at the edge of the pressure ridge watching the cabin. I've tried photographing it, but the camera won't focus. Marcus suggested I report it, but to whom? Who would believe me? December 15th, it's getting closer, now standing within 100 yards of the cabin. Elena asked why I keep staring out the window at night. I didn't tell her, she's only 8. What would I say? December 28th, it spoke last night. Used my wife's voice calling from outside. Thomas, come out here. Thomas, I need you. Ruth has been dead for 2 years. It knows, somehow it knows. The entries went on for years, describing something that visited the cabin during the polar night. Something tall and pale that watched from the sea ice. Something that learned voices and used them. My grandfather had seen it for over a decade. The last entry was dated 1 week before his death. I understand now. It's not hostile, it's lonely. It watches because it wants to understand us, wants to be near us. But getting too close is dangerous. Not because it means harm, but because proximity to it changes you. You start to see things the way it sees them. You start to understand the darkness differently. Marcus was right to leave. I should have left too, but now it's too late. I can hear it calling even during the day now, even when the sun is up. It's in my head. What are you reading? Elena asked. I closed the journal. Just Grandpa's notes, old research stuff. That night I heard it. Around midnight, a voice outside calling, Thomas, Thomas, come out here. It was our grandfather's voice. I recognized it from old videos, that slight tremor he'd developed in his later years. Elena sat up in her bunk. Did you hear that? Stay here, I said. I grabbed a flashlight and went to the window. Something was standing about 50 yards from the cabin at the edge of the sea ice. Tall and pale, barely visible in the aurora light. It was facing the cabin, facing us. Thomas, it called again. Come out here, I need to show you something. That's Grandpa's voice, Elena whispered behind me. She'd gotten up despite my warning. That's his voice, Miles. It's not him, I said. He's dead, that's something else. The thing took a step closer. It moved smoothly like it was gliding over the ice. Another step. In the aurora light, I could see more details, the arms too long, the legs bending in ways that weren't quite right. We need to leave, I said, right now. We packed in 5 minutes, just grabbed essentials and our gear. The snowmobiles were parked 20 yards from the cabin. We'd have to go outside, get on the machines, and drive away. 2 miles to Wainwright, we could make it. The thing was standing between us and the snowmobiles now. Thomas, it called. Elena, stay, let me show you. It knew our names. Our grandfather's journal hadn't mentioned that it could learn not just voices, but names of people it had never met. We go out the back, I said. The cabin had a rear door facing inland. We run to the village on foot, forget the snowmobiles. That's 2 miles, Elena said, in the dark. In this cold. Better than staying here. We went out the back door as quietly as we could. The cold hit immediately, probably -45 with wind chill. We started running, or trying to run, in heavy snow boots and parkas. Behind us, I heard the voice change. It wasn't our grandfather anymore. Now it was our grandmother, who died when I was 6. Miles, Elena, wait, don't run, I need to see you. I didn't look back. We kept going, following the trail toward Wainwright. My legs burned, my lungs hurt from the cold air. Elena was keeping pace beside me. "Why are you afraid?" The voice again, this time our mother's voice. Our mother was alive in Portland, but hearing her voice out here made my stomach drop. "I just want to talk. I've been watching you. I've been so lonely." We ran for what felt like an hour, but was probably 15 minutes. Finally, I looked back. The thing was following us, maybe 100 yards behind, walking at that steady, measured pace. Not running, just walking, but somehow keeping up with our panicked sprint. I saw lights ahead, Wainwright, the small cluster of buildings. We ran harder, every breath painful. The lights got closer, 50 yards, 25. We burst into the first building we reached, a community hall. There were people inside, locals playing cards. They looked up in surprise at two outsiders crashing through the door, gasping and frozen. "Something is following us," I managed to say. "From Point Lonely, something." An older man stood up. I recognized him vaguely. He'd been at my grandfather's funeral. His name was William Bodfish. "You saw it," he said quietly. I nodded, still trying to catch my breath. William walked to the door and looked out into the darkness. After a moment, he closed the door and turned to us. "It won't come into the village. It stays out on the ice. Your grandfather saw it for years, studied it, tried to understand it. It drove him a little mad, I think." "What is it?" Elena asked. William shrugged. "Old, been here longer than we have. The elders say it's been on the ice for thousands of years, watching, learning. It doesn't hurt people, but it changes them if they spend too much time near it. Your grandfather couldn't stop watching it, became obsessed. Toward the end, he said he could understand it, said it was trying to communicate." We stayed in Wainwright that night. The next day, a group from the village went to the cabin to get our snowmobiles and belongings. They said the thing was gone, but they found footprints in the snow around the cabin. Huge prints, too many toes, circling the building over and over. We left everything behind. Elena signed papers giving the cabin to the village, said she didn't want it, didn't want anything to do with Point Lonely. We flew back to Anchorage and tried to forget. But I still think about our grandfather's journal, that last entry. About how he could hear it calling even during the day, even when the sun was up. About how it had gotten into his head. Sometimes, when it's very quiet, I hear it too, not outside, inside. A voice in the back of my mind, patient and lonely, asking me to come back, telling me it has something to show me. Using voices of people I've lost, grandparents, friends, a cousin who died young. I ignore it. I stay in bright places around people. I don't go north anymore, especially not in winter. But I know it's still there, out on the ice at Point Lonely, watching the cabin and waiting. Waiting for someone else to visit, someone else to watch, someone else to learn, and maybe, eventually, someone who won't run away. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let me know in the comments which story unsettled you most, and share this with your friends who love a good scare. Until next time, stay safe out there.